When Guerrilla Games released Horizon Zero Dawn in 2017, the gaming world took full notice of what the studio mostly associated with the Killzone franchise had developed. Zero Dawn was an open-world, post-apocalyptic experience featuring the player taking on sentient machines, growing into more animalistic creatures sporting electric wings, fire breath, and more weak points than a poorly made building. Featuring stellar graphics, solid gameplay fundamentals, including a climbing system straight out of Assassin's Creed, and remarkable voice acting, even when conversing with the most unimportant NPCs. The wait for a sequel had gamers anticipating how the studio could expand upon everything crafted in Zero Dawn, revealing Forbidden West, when it seemed like the real world would reach its end too. Having enjoyed the first game, though didn't love it as much as many others did, mostly due to the long-winded story and sluggish gameplay in certain aspects, I hoped the developers smooth out some of the problems from the original iteration while expanding the world and its lore as promised. Set 6 months after the events of Zero Dawn, the savior of Meridian, a term Aloy vocally hates, though opens the door to reasonably have people ask her for help as they believe she can do anything now, heads west against the wishes of people who know about how dangerous the West is and those who've only heard rumors. The near 30-hour story is nothing compared to how much time the player will most likely spend completing side missions, optional objectives, and simply traversing the world. Similar to its predecessor, Forbidden West has a rather simple platinum trophy to obtain, with requirements like completing certain side quests instead of all 49, finishing the 4 optional cauldrons, and scanning every enemy type, but not every enemy subtype. After 90 hours of playtime, I attained the platinum trophy with over 80% overall completion, and the intent of going back and finishing all those side missions, gather collectibles, and win that one race that proved too much for Aloy's mount. The developers decided that a lot of what worked in the first game needed to return, while certain aspects should be modified to offer more of a challenge for those who thought the original game saw Aloy be at a godlike level by the time she reached level 50. Combat is still a mixed bag, with positives tied to the long-range weapons. Unlike the first game where the player was slowly introduced to tackling the mechanized enemies, the developers mostly hoped players were knowledgeable about how to overcome certain metal adversaries, including scanning weak points with Aloy's focus, the game's version of detective mode that is also useful in finding the plethora of collectibles, using a specific arrow or other offered tool in Aloy's inventory including elemental tripwires, restraining rope casters, and new items like spears and traps to take down each adversary. An obvious change in regards to conquering enemies is most can't be one-shot killed by hitting a particular weak point if Aloy is close to or under the level of the scanned enemy, making it necessary to plan accordingly to avoid being spotted and overwhelmed by the hard-hitting foes if the player is attempting a stealth attack. There was a lot of thought put into how to make the combat different than the original by adding so many options for the player. If they choose to utilize multiple instruments including new ammo types like plasma that acts as a time bomb if Aloy builds up a struck foe's intolerance, and adhesive that temporarily slows down enemies via brown goo. The dynamic combat that comes with fighting the animal-like adversaries makes almost every battle tense or downright insane, depending on the beast's size, speed, and general aggression, with the more volatile monsters hitting harder and faster without fear of retaliation compared to the original game. A great way to handle the inevitable onslaughts is through the extensive skill tree sporting 6 subcategories focusing on melee attacks, setting traps, shooting, gathering resources and healing efficiency, stealth, and handling mechs, including the override ability that returns from the first game where Aloy can temporarily force loyalty from mechs for help in battle or traversing the environment. The passive skills gained through the tree, including increasing the length of Aloy's slow down time effect when aiming down the sights of a bow, coincide well with the new Valor Surge. Valor Surge abilities vary in execution, but always provides Aloy a temporary boost or saving grace. Weapon-based Valor Surge abilities are naturally attached to the weapons associated with said surge, gathering stamina as the battle progresses to use at any time when the bar makes it available, such as being able to shoot a complete tripwire with the touch of a button instead of the player having to manually shoot one post, then the other post, hoping the second sticks in the appropriate spot. The ability-centric Valor Surge can be activated when the meter located underneath the weapon-based surge is filled. Depending on the Valor Surge chosen, Aloy will dramatically perform a short cinematic act like painting her face or chugging a potion vial to precursor her return to battle, where her arrows will do more damage or her health will constantly restore, without the need of manual input respectively. The more defensive Valor Surges can be downright game-breaking, including the aforementioned Health Restoration Surge when the player upgrades it to the max level of 3. Planning out what skills will benefit Aloy early is essential, and can help survive some unexpected difficult moments. Melee combat is expanded in terms of combos learned from the skill tree and general abilities added to her repertoire, including the Resonator Blast that sees an enemy become temporarily stunned while gaining a new illuminated weak point that does major damage to the foe if Aloy shoots the identified spot. Using her staff, Aloy can switch between light, quick attacks, and heavy, slower strikes that have the potential of knocking an enemy over, breaking their guard, and even jumping off them for a follow-up arrow shot. Unfortunately, the rigid nature of Aloy's movements become locked in and at times uncontrollable, no matter how the player tries to adjust her swing, thus leaving her open to counterattacks that can not only take away half of her health, but also stun her for a subsequent, potentially game-ending strike after she swats at nothing but air. The lacking lock-on system seen in games like these potentially makes combat frustrating, as enemies usually move a lot faster than at times the player can react and rotate the camera while readjusting Aloy's aim. Limiting Aloy's stamina and weapon output, like placing traps and tripwires, also hurts the combat aspect. In the original iteration, Aloy could dodge roll to her heart's content to avoid attacks. In Forbidden West, Aloy can only roll 3 times back to back before stumbling. This wouldn't be an issue if not for certain enemies, usually the bigger ones, pull off 3 to 4 swatting or projectile attacks at a time, leaving Aloy open to be struck if the player has used those 3 rolls to effectively avoid the first 3 attacks. Tripwires and traps are now limited in the amount Aloy can place on a battlefield at a time, only being slightly expanded in number by skill upgrades and what she's wearing. An odd design choice is having to scroll through the secondary items like this is the original Grand Theft Auto PS2 games. Instead of having a wheel pop up when holding down the D-pad, Aloy positions herself to either craft or manage this list of secondary items. There's no way to do a quick pull-up of the secondary items when in battle. One major problem that a changing of clothing can prevent is the camera when taking on the largest enemies or foliage gets a little too close to said camera. The gigantic adversaries not only move faster compared to those in the first game, but when they get close, it becomes almost impossible to see what's happening and where to go to avoid being killed. Last but not least in terms of combat-oriented setbacks are some of the animations when Aloy is knocked down, be it her being stun-locked or simply taking too long to get up, as an enemy prepares another attack that strikes Aloy right as she rises to rock her again. Just like in the last game, weapon modification with patches adds a little kick to each slot, be it extra damage or elemental effects. Aloy's armor too can be buffed by clothing specific patches to increase her defenses against certain status effects and general defenses. Not to mention cosmetic dyes made with flowers collected when traveling can change the color of her outfit. Some armor also has innate buffs like increasing the armor of traps that can be placed at a time by 2, and even a suit that gives Aloy the ability to not die once per battle if her health reaches 0. Similar to the weapon offering, ammo is plentiful and players will most likely be switching up their attires depending on the situation. Almost every weapon and piece of armor has the ability to be upgraded using a workbench found at every settlement, and items either discovered on fallen foes or hunting live animals. Of course, the rarer the armor or weapon, as per the norm now, weapons and armor are assigned rarity levels from common to legendary. The more impressive and tougher to get resources are needed, like a Stormbird nerve or a circulator from an Apex Stalker. Aloy's story following the events of Horizon Zero Dawn is a very interesting one. Instead of being a coming-of-age story where the protagonist comes upon the truth of how her world operates, Aloy now finds herself as a savior, both exalted and criticized, looking to stop the spread of corruption initiated by the sentient AI program Hades in the first game. Unlike the previous iteration, the story doesn't take too long to really get going. That's helped by introduction of new tribes, adversaries, and mechanized beasts. Pacing is rarely a problem if players are taking part solely in the main missions, with some being imperative to complete before exploring or finishing certain side quests, such as gaining the ability to set vines on fire or even flying on a sunbird. Arguably, the story's biggest issues comes with its finale and the new antagonist. In terms of villains, the more rooted in primal reality enemies like Regella, voiced by Angela Bassett, work exceptionally well. On the opposite end is the unveiling of futuristic humans who can float, sport shields, and laser guns. While the game is a sci-fi experience, these very unlikable adversaries almost go too far into the futuristic realm compared to everything else before and after their first and final appearances. Once again, a Horizon game ends with the promise of something in the future that gamers have no idea if they will get to experience, and if they do, when they will be able to play the third Horizon. To complement the narrative both positively and negatively is an expansive world of things to do, people to interact with, and missions to take part in, including 49 subquests, with some of the most expressive NPCs seen in a video game to date, while the actual side missions are usually nothing more than fetch quests or going somewhere to slaughter a machine. The characterization and interactions that come from said quest make them so rewarding. Missions will have Aloy saving people from being executed after a wrong accusation, giving an elder a fleeting reminder of what she once loved, freeing people from the depths of a collapsing mine, exploring coastal waters to find lost treasure for a lamenting cook, as food provides temporary boosts like more health or faster stamina regeneration. To top it off, most side missions reward the player greatly with skill points, metal shards, the game's equivalent of currency, and grand items like weapons, armor, or valuables ready to be sold. The developers expanded what the player can do beyond side missions and narrative quests by bringing back more fleshed out versions of the open world checklist options, such as scaling those tall necks that reveal more of the map, and exploring the metallic fortresses known as cauldrons that house both a boss enemy at the end and the gained ability to override certain beasts depending on the cauldron completed. Hunting Grounds return featuring timed quests for Aloy to complete under dedicated scenarios, i.e. electrocuting scrappers and dropping environmental traps like a pile of logs on their stunned frames. Alongside Hunting Grounds are the new melee pits that both pushes the player to learn new melee attacks courtesy of the skill tree and taking on mini-bosses that must be defeated to confront a legendary figure associated with a single side mission. And then there's the arena, a grand series of timed fights against mechs with limiting stocks and rising difficulties. The rewards coming from clearing the arena are some of the best weapons and armor in the game, not to mention potentially getting on a global leaderboard for clearing the finale of each arena difficulty as fast as possible. Puzzle challenges are also available, known as Relic Ruins, that usually has the player pulling crates around, yanking walls down, and reading notes to discover codes necessary to unlock the reward barred door. Like the melee pits, finishing rebel outposts and camps will lead to a memorable side mission, while completing a set of collectibles such as survey drones is only beneficial in showcasing how great the game looks. Racing is arguably the worst of anything newly added, with stiff, road rash style gameplay that only gets more frustrating when the rubber band AI suddenly pops up and stuns Aloy's mount. On the opposite end of the satisfaction spectrum is Machine Strike, a chess-like board game with collectible and craftable pieces featuring opponents scattered across the map a la The Witcher 3 or even Final Fantasy VIII. Technically, Forbidden West is a perfect example of quality optimization. On the PlayStation 5, there are two options for performance and fidelity, with the latter sacrificing frames per second for better graphics. Both modes are effective in having a consistent experience, at least on the PS5, with no noticeable frame rate drops during a near 90-hour playthrough. The world itself is gorgeous to look at, with rather quick loading times on the PS5 when fast traveling via campfires. Graphical glitches like falling into the world or certain objects are rare, but can happen. The haptic feedback triggers play a major role in shooting arrows, with growing pressure when drawing a bow being more noticeable as Aloy shoots something like a precision bow rather than the simple hunting arrow. Sound is a major factor in making this an immersive experience, including the booming drums during a hectic battle against a snap maw, or the pitter-patter of Aloy's footsteps when moving across the desert of the former Las Vegas. In a lot of ways, Forbidden West is a tour de force of world building and convincing the player to explore, especially with the implementation of Aloy's glider tool, similar to the one Link used in Breath of the Wild. Unfortunately, actually exploring can be an issue due to some odd decisions in regards to climbing and parkour. Thanks to a fantastic set of adjustable settings to make things either harder or easier for the player, including down to enemies not losing loot that would, under the original setting, disappear alongside that foe's death. The player can turn on guide points and identifiable climbing possibilities. Oddly enough, some rocks on the same wall Aloy is currently clutching the side of can't be climbed without much reason or explanation. Other times Aloy will jitter on a ledge or when jumping from one spot to another. Similar to its predecessor, there are definite issues with Forbidden West that are outweighed by some grand design choices for combat, side missions really making the world's NPCs feel alive, and more options in regards to spending time avoiding progressing the main narrative. It may not be the grandiose sequel that changes a franchise, let alone a genre. But what Forbidden West does, it mostly does immaculately, without succumbing to the weight of its own ambitions. Forbidden West offers so much for the player to take part in, from the extensive main story missions to the expressive side missions, various mini-missions and completion criteria, and general exploration options set in a new portion of this worn and plagued planet. The few technical issues don't compare to how well most everything else works, be it during combat or just walking around, as Aloy remarks about her current setting. With that being stated, certain removed aspects from Zero Dawn in regards to fighting may turn off some gamers who enjoyed the first experience. Thankfully, those who are tired of open world games will find a lot to actually like without feeling too overwhelmed, thanks to the design of certain abilities and items needed to progress via main story completion. Once again, this is another must-play PlayStation game that is as rewarding as conquering a Thunderjaw with its own weapon Aloy shot off during the heat of battle.
Yea, for as the first shall be...
Shut up. Why the delay?
The Tanakh are a tribe composed of 3 clans. How many banners do you see?
You're just gonna wait? Go find out what's wrong.
Oh, this isn't some forgotten corner of the East where you come from, Nora. It's the Forbidden West. If you don't like it, run back to Meridian, file a complaint.
The Meridian I saved, you mean?
That's right. Nobody walks to the gate until the 3rd clan arrives and the Tanakh's horn has sounded. Not even the savior of Meridian.
Lucky for you, the savior of Meridian still has a few things she wants to take care of.